Gary Player is one of those legends where the stories never quite sound small. Part of the Big Three, 9 majors. A guy who flew millions of miles chasing titles on every continent, and somehow, decades later, the people who knew this sport best still talk about him like he's family. So today, we're not just telling you who Gary Player was, we're letting the people around him do the talking. These are real quotes from real players about what Gary Player actually meant to them. Let's start with Jack Nicklaus, because when Nicklaus talks about Gary Player, he doesn't just sound like a rival. He sounds like a man talking about someone he genuinely loves. And this one line might be the simplest, most powerful thing anyone has ever said about Gary. "I don't think there is any doubt that you are my closest friend in the game of golf." That's Jack Nicklaus, the man with more major titles than anyone in history, and he's telling you that Gary Player, his fiercest rival for over 2 decades, is his closest friend in golf. That sets the tone for everything that follows in this video. Because Gary wasn't just a champion people respected from a distance, he was someone they genuinely wanted in their corner. Now here's something the old photos don't quite capture. The Big Three actually had fun with each other. Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player, 3 of the most competitive men to ever hold a club. And yes, they were fierce out on the course, but off it, they needled each other constantly. Gary described it best himself, in one of those honorary starters moments at the Masters. "We always wanted to beat the living hell out of each other." And then there's this line, and it's a classic. The Big Three had a running joke about Gary being tight with money, and Palmer, never one to miss a setup, put it best. "Gary has deep pockets and short arms. He's so cheap he wouldn't give ducks a free drink if he owned Lake Okeechobee." That's Palmer taking a shot, and Gary, knowing full well it was coming, probably loved every second of it. That back and forth is what made the Big Three so watchable. Off the course, the banter was just as sharp as the golf. That's the thing people forget. These were real human beings. They laughed, they jabbed, they gave each other grief. And then they'd show up the next week trying to take each other's heads off again. That's what made the era so alive. But Gary's legacy isn't just about what he won, it's about what he gave. Trevor Immelman, the 2008 Masters champion, has spoken openly about growing up, knowing Gary, playing alongside him young, and then Gary becoming one of the most important figures in his life. Gary gave him advice, support, encouragement, and tough love when it was needed. And this is the line that makes that whole relationship land. "He's just a wonderful man, had been like a father figure to me." When a major champion calls you a father figure, that's a different kind of legacy entirely. Now, to keep this honest, Gary Player was not a soft personality. He was intense, he was competitive to his core. And that edge, the same one that made him great, could create friction, even with fellow legends. The clearest example is the 1983 Skins game controversy. Tom Watson accused Gary of improving his lie by moving a rooted leaf that was sitting right behind his ball. Watson didn't mince words about what he saw. He said, "As I saw it, he was moving a leaf right behind his ball. I know the leaf was rooted because it popped back up to its original position." We're not here to retry that case. What it shows is something more interesting. Gary Player didn't float through golf. He charged through it, and sometimes that charge left marks. That's part of what made him such a lasting presence. He was never neutral. You felt him in a room, on a course, in a rivalry, and the sport is definitely richer for it. Now let's pull back to the bigger picture. To South African golfers, Gary Player isn't just a Hall of Famer. He's the reason they believed it was possible in the first place. He was the proof that someone from the southern tip of Africa could travel the world and beat every single one of them. Ernie Els put it in one line, and it's the kind of line you don't really need to add much to. He says, "We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Gary Player." That's a torch-passing quote. From one South African great to another, across generations, Gary opened doors. He made people believe. And the players who came after him, the ones who went on to win their own majors, they know it. And here's what's worth noting. That respect doesn't stop at Gary's generation, or even at men's golf. When Gary turned 90, Annika Sörenstam, one of the most dominant winners the women's game has ever produced, kept it simple. And sometimes, simple is exactly right. She said, "Gary, I think you're an incredible inspiration to many." That's Annika, someone with 10 majors and 72 LPGA wins. She's not giving out empty compliments. What she's telling you is that Gary's impact isn't measured in trophies alone. It's measured in the example he set, the way he lived, competed, and showed up, decade after decade. So when players are asked about Gary Player, here's what you actually hear. You hear, closest friend. You hear, father figure. You hear, we wouldn't be here without him. And you also hear the other side. A man so fiercely competitive that even the people who loved him sometimes felt the heat of it. That's the Gary Player story. Not just a trophy count, but a man who mattered deeply, genuinely, to the people who came after him, who opened doors, shaped careers, and left a mark on everyone who crossed his path. 9 majors, 1,000,000 miles traveled, and a legacy that, clearly, goes well beyond the scorecard.